Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping, he says he plans to raise the issues of Taiwan and Jimmy Lai, imprisoned Hong Kong pro-democracy activist, among other things. Joining us to discuss is Declan Gangley, entrepreneur and businessman and friend of Jimmy Lai. So Declan, good afternoon to you. Thank you for coming on the show. Now, as you know, a bipartisan group of 38 U.S. senators sent a letter urging Trump to secure the release of Jimmy Lai. So, I mean, what is the CCP afraid of that it imprisoned Jimmy Lai and many others like him?
Well, Jimmy is a champion of democracy in Hong Kong. He has become a symbol of freedom and of resistance, if you will, to the iron fist of the Communist Party of China. That said, he has been in jail and in solitary confinement for an extremely long period of time. And I think really what the Chinese Communist Party leadership needs to decide is if they want to make Jimmy Lai a martyr forever. Because something to remember about Jimmy is a Christian, a devout Christian, and in the concept of Christian martyrdom begins not during life, but at death. You're a hero while you're alive. You become a martyr from the moment that you die. And if they allow Jimmy and they make Jimmy die in prison, they will have created a martyr whose name will live on for 1,000 years. And his example and his as a heroic Christian example of Christian integrity and fortitude. And so my hope is that what we are going to see is that the Communist Party of China and Xi Jinping sees sense and sees that the sensible thing to do is to release Jimmy Lai, allow him to go back to his family, allow him to leave Hong Kong if that's what he wants to do, and to enjoy during his, whatever time he has left here on earth, to be able to spend that time with his family and with those that he loves. Really, they have the power. They have shown that they have the power. And President Trump is perhaps the only person in the world, aside from Chairman Xi, who has the power and the ability to get Jimmy Lai out of prison and bring him back to his family. And I hope and pray that that is what happens.
So on that note, from your perspective, why is it important for President Trump to raise human rights issues related to trade talks with China?
Well, because ultimately, and President Trump knows this very well, of course, he doesn't need any lessons from any of us. The Communist Party of China is an oppressor of personal freedom. The Communist Party of China wants to be able to trade with the free world, with democracies, with no price tag attached to that, with no conditions attached to that. And of course, democracies throughout the world, there are conditions to be able to engage with trade, with free trade, and we passionately believe in free trade. That Western democracies do believe in free trade, but it's not at any price and under any circumstances. And that's something that President Trump has made clear, both with his tariff policy with respect to China. And I expect, and I don't know this, but I expect that a gesture like the release of Jimmy Lai can only help contribute to a more favorable and conducive environment to being able to engage in the types of business and trade that a place like China wants to do. I don't know that, but it certainly can't hurt. It can only help.
Do you think the CCP is capable of fundamentally changing its behavior?
Personally, no. But I'm not I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. I have purposefully never done business in China, and that option was open to me for the last few decades, and I've never done it because I had dealings many years ago, up until the year 1997, and in fact 2000 in the former Soviet Union, and I saw firsthand what the consequences are of Communist Party dictatorship in leadership, and I have a very firm view of what to expect from Communist Party cadres. I'm always willing to be proven wrong and be confounded, and releasing Jimmy Lai would be one of those things that would somewhat confound me, but it hasn't happened yet. And if Communist Party of China wants the world to take a different view or look at it in a different way, then it certainly needs to change the way that it's doing things, including locking up political prisoners like Jimmy Lai.
So, Declan, as we mentioned earlier, you are friends with Jimmy Lai. So I want to ask you this. What did he mean when he said previously that he was ready to go to prison for his beliefs? What are those beliefs? And tell us what kind of person he is.
To understand Jimmy Lai, and look, many of your viewers may not understand this, and I get that, but to understand Jimmy Lai, there's been a very good book written about him, by the way, but you have to understand Catholicism. And the concept of Catholic martyrdom and the path to sainthood, because Jimmy has, in the Christian Catholic concept, he has taken up his cross, and he is making a sacrifice and taking on a massive burden for it, in the interest of setting an example of Christian virtue, Christian heroic virtue. And the examples that Jimmy will be drawing upon will be saints like Saint Thomas More, who stood up to then King Henry VIII in England many centuries ago and defied the king and was executed for it. He went to the Tower of London and he was beheaded for standing up for what he saw as being the truth and something that was worth going to the scaffold for or dying for. So this example of self-sacrifice, of in the Christian concept of taking up your cross and willingly enter into suffering in order to create an example of virtue, of heroic virtue, that is what Jimmy is doing. And the examples that he looks to are the saints of the Christian church, of the Catholic church, who for centuries have made these kind of sacrifices in order to become and give examples of human virtue and freedom.
If Jimmy Lai becomes a martyr, of course, none of us are hoping for that. We're all hoping that he gets released from prison. But if it does happen, how much do you think that's going to influence people to mobilize, to come together? Because recently we've seen the passing of Charlie Kirk in the United States. It has led to his movement becoming much bigger than when he was alive. But do you see that happening within the context of the CCP and Hong Kong?
I do. And Jimmy, if they turn him into a martyr, he will be much bigger as a martyr and even bigger as a martyr than he is today. And it will not be something that will last for a year or 2 years or 5 years. It will last for centuries. He will build what is called, in the Christian concept, a cultus, and that is a following of people who will look to him and the example that he set of heroic Christian virtue. And he will be somebody that will be remembered. I just referenced to you Saint Thomas More. Thomas More was the Chancellor of England. He was the equivalent of what we today would call the Prime Minister. He was the first minister of the king. And yet, for Christian reasons, he defied the king. And we are still talking about him today. And he went to the Tower of London and to his execution before or during the Reformation in England, which is centuries and centuries ago. They're still talking about him today.
Declan, is it possible for Washington to pursue economic interests with Beijing while still holding China accountable for its human rights violations?
Look, this is above my pay grade. It's a very, very fine line to walk. There's an extremely talented team of people in Washington, D.C. and on the China desk, if I can call it that are working this issue. And if I trust any administration, any government to be able to find that fine line, to thread that needle, I trust the Trump administration to do it.
Okay, just finally, Declan, and I understand you've been outspoken on the Chinese regime for decades now. Can you just point out to one thing? What would you like to see come out of Trump's meeting with Xi Jinping tonight?
What I would hope for is not something that's going to be happening. As a young man, I had visited the Soviet Union. I saw the Berlin Wall come down. I saw the Soviet Union and the Communist Party of the Soviet Union retire. I would like to see a free and democratic China. And I still believe and I dream and I pray that during the course of my lifetime, that is something that we will see, that a free China, that the Communist Party of China dissolves itself, that it creates a real vibrant democracy. We know that it works in Chinese culture because we can see it in Taiwan. And China, if it did that, would become the workshop of the world, the economic powerhouse of the world. I do not wish China ill. I wish it enormous success. It is certainly a contender for true global leadership over the course of the next century. But with this millstone of the Communist Party system around its neck, it is never going to reach its full potential. And I hope that eventually we will see the Chinese people and even maybe Chinese leadership decide to walk away from this structure and embrace a whole new approach for a new and free China.
Well, Declan, I have to say this was a very engaging conversation. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Ron DeSantis has directed Florida's Board of Governors to crack down on H-1B visa abuse in higher education. The Florida governor